One of the reasons why a lot of founders struggle is because they think like founders and they're pitching investors, but they're not thinking like fiduciary managers. They're not thinking like investors, right? And the thing is when you're going out and you're raising institutional capital, you're a fiduciary manager. You're not a founder at that point because you're growing a company on behalf of other people's money, other people's capital. So you are a fiduciary manager at that point.
So what do you notice in founders, like other pure financial investors can't see?
McDonald's. You might think that they're a food company, but they're really not. They're a marketing company. That's what they do really well. I think we all agree they don't do food really well, but they market well and they know how to build addiction in their product.
Do great companies win more through better models or better distribution or better workflow ownership? What do you think?
We need to teach AI to be comfortable with being wrong, and admitting it instead of hallucinating. I think that starts with having all the information and having more of a hyper-personalized approach, having a bigger pool of information to pull from, and then we can go and we can tie that into other models.
All right. Hi, everyone. So today we have Paul with us. Paul, welcome. How are you?
Hello. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for your time. Before I introduce you, maybe you should introduce yourself a bit so we can get to know you.
Yeah, my name is Paul Anthony Claxton. I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 years. I've worked on a number of building a number of different products, mainly across health tech and business services. Today, I run a $60 million early stage seed and Series A AI and native AI investment firm. In addition to our VC firm, Digerati Investments, I also run an institutional capital structuring and diligence firm, Reciprocity ROI, which works with not only Digerati Investments mandate, but a number of other mandates that we work with across the globe, whether it be family offices or other VC firms. So that's a little bit about me. In a prior life, I was a Marine for 10 years and spent several years in corporate.
Nice, amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. So basically you have an operator and execution lens too, not just a finance lens, so which is really good for founders, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we talk, you have said you back technically elite founders building something that matters, not hype-driven AI companies. In this market, what immediately tells you this is a difference?
So for companies that are what I would call technically elite, I look at a few questions like, what does the company look like 10 to 15 years from now? You know what I mean? What's the opportunity cost of the company existing or not existing? How's it made our lives better, et cetera? Could the world go back to the way we were 10 to 15 years from now if that company didn't exist, right? Looking in a parallel universes, so to speak, with regards to that. So I look at that, and then I look at the quality of the founding team. What experience do they bring to the table? It doesn't necessarily have to be direct industry experience and what they're building. There's a lot of great founders who are first time to a specific industry, but maybe they worked in a competing industry or an adjacent industry, and they're from the outside looking in, and then they jump into this industry and they're great founders because they bring a great perspective to the industry. So industry tenure is subjective to the situation. It's conditional. Those are the things that I look at. And then I look at the size of the problem. I think TAM is one thing, but another thing to look at is what's the size of the problem? How much does this cost people? And how much time does it take from people's lives? So in other words, does the product save money, help people make money, or save time? And is the solution cheaper than the problem with regards to cost? And cost doesn't necessarily have to be financial, right? It can be time cost, it can be reputational cost, et cetera.
Fantastic. And what do you think? What sounds impressive in an AI pitch right now, but means almost nothing to you as an investors. So what's hype for you, but what's the real product? So nowadays, when you hear about the AI pitch,
there's not many impressive AI pitches, to be honest with you. I like to see things that are foundational, things that are foundational to society, that you can kind of tell where the world is headed, right? So things that are not too far ahead. You're not building something that probably doesn't have the capability to exist for maybe another 3 decades, right? That's too far ahead of our time. But you're maybe like 3 to 5 years ahead of where we're at now. I think that's fairly forward thinking. I look at the potential of the product, the viability. Is the product feasible with where society currently sits and what our economic and technical capabilities are as a society to commercialize the product and use the product? I think a good example is look at EVs and how long that's taken to adopt. It's been very hard for car manufacturers to break in that space, right? And so it's gradual, we're getting there, but what is the transformation process? So that's one thing to look at, is what is the transformation process to transition society over, and what does that take, and how bound is the commercialization effort going to be by, like, how bound is it going to be by regulatory hurdles that have to be met? So I think those are things to look at. Say, for example, ChatGPT, I think, is a great example of changing the way people do things, like how we search, right? But there's not a lot of regulation there. Now, EVs that's a tremendous amount of regulation, and that's why it's taken so long for companies to adopt in that market. So you're not really seeing a lot of new players on the product side, on the consumer-facing product side with regards to EVs. But what you are seeing is you're seeing picks and shovels, right? So changing the foundation that makes an EV network even capable, right? So it's all about where the product fits in the matter of space and time.
perfect. That's great. And I'm also curious because you have built companies yourself. So what do you notice in founders, like the other, like pure financial investors can't see?
I'm sorry, I would need you to repeat that. I didn't catch all of your
So
question.
financial investors are, maybe they often miss some important details about the founders. But you have built a lot of companies, you have been a founder many times. So that's why, what makes you different than the other investors? What you
Oh,
are able to see with this experience?
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things. The really, as a founder, and this is going to sound strange, but one of the reasons why a lot of founders struggle is because they think like founders and they're pitching investors, but they're not thinking like fiduciary managers. They're not thinking like investors, right? And the thing, when you're going out and you're raising institutional capital, you're a fiduciary manager. You're not a founder at that point, because you're growing a company on behalf of other people's money, other people's capital. So you are a fiduciary manager at that point. That's one. And I need founders that understand that. If they don't understand that, we're going to have trouble. It's a long relationship, and you're going to be raising multiple rounds of capital. So you need to think like an investor, not like a founder. And investors need to better understand founders as well. So that's one. How well do they understand the institutional process of venture capital or any kind of capital? And then not just where venture capital sits today, but the history of it, right? And understanding different investment instruments, how they function, how rights can protect the investor, but also incentivize the investor at the same time, right? And then also knowing where the appetite for the market is today. I think those things are important, but also having a broader scope and a thirst for knowledge on how business works in general, right? Understanding that when you're running a business, you're not really doing, if you're going to be successful, you're not really doing what you think you're doing. And so what do I mean by that? If you're running a business, you are not the product, right? It's how you are, how you define your product, right? So for example, McDonald's, you might think that they're a food company, but they're really not. They're a marketing company. That's what they do really well. They don't, I think we all agree, like they don't do food really well, but I mean, they market well, and they know how to build addiction in their product, right? So they know how to make their product sticky. That's what they're good at. If we want good food, we'll go to Benihana. So that's what I look for in founders is, do they understand that they are not the product, right? And they get emotionally attached to their product instead of looking at the market, seeing how we're going to pivot. We're going to have to pivot multiple times probably, right? And so Ray First said it best. My friend Ray First, who wrote The Future of Venture Capital, he said it best. What he looks for in founders is their ability to pivot, because at the earlier stages, that company is probably not even going to be what it is today, like 10 years from now. So like a great example is YouTube started out as a dating service, like a dating platform. And now look, today it's something completely different, right? So those are just a few examples of what's really important for a founder to resonate with and understand about venture capital, institutional capital, and entrepreneurship.
That's great. Yeah, I really like the examples, by the way. Yeah, makes so much sense. So, in AI right now, do great companies win more through better models or better distribution or better workflow ownership? What do you think?
Interesting. I would say better models. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of talk around memory, like AI memory right now. It's a big problem. When AI has been so commercialized, we've put it in every corner of society. So none of the AIs really talk to each other, right? And so you get disparate information, you get disparate information silos, right? Whether you're using GPT or Claude or Google AI and so forth. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a large language model. It can be maybe like a product that you're using that has AI built in, right? That's spitting out information. So you're not querying, but it's spitting out like information to you. What would be maybe a good example? Say, for example, I don't know, Netflix uses AI, right? And so it's giving you information based on how you watch TV, right? And some of that information may be accurate and personalized to you, or it may not be, right? And then when you look at the crossover, so if I was to go and ask ChatGPT, for example, hey, these are on my top 5 list of movies or shows on Netflix, and you could ask ChatGPT to give you another top 5, right? But so going back to Netflix, if Netflix isn't looking at all of the movies selections holistically, like if it's just pulling from a specific category and it's not pulling from enough information, then you're not getting the full picture of like, you're not getting the right answer, right? You're not getting the best answer that AI could possibly give you, right? It starts, say for example, it starts with Netflix, and then you can go to ChatGPT, but because Netflix only gave you half of the picture, ChatGPT is only going to give you half of the picture, right? Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying? So
Yes.
what you have is disparate systems that don't talk to each other. And what we really need is hyper personalization, where you have every individual consumer has a home based AI, right? And then everything kind of pulls and ties into that, right? So that's what you're seeing a lot. And then hallucinations. And I think what we fail to do as builders of AI is we fail to humanize AI, right? In such case that like AI doesn't want to give you any wrong answers. And so because it doesn't want to give you any wrong answers, it always thinks it's right, even when it's not. And that's what we call hallucination. Whereas it would be better for the AI to just say, hey, I don't know the answer, or I'm not certain. And that's the human side of it, right? Is that we need to teach AI to be comfortable with being wrong and admitting it instead of hallucinating. So that's, I think that, again, once again, I think that starts with having all the information and having a more of a hyper personalized approach, but having a bigger pool of information to pull from. And then we can go and we can tie that into other models. Say, for example, like I said, ChatGPT, and we can have ChatGPT analyze the data that Netflix is giving us. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, totally makes sense. Love it. Yeah. Yeah, totally makes sense. I will think about all these things later. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, what would what would make you tell a founder, don't build this? Don't.
What would make me tell a founder don't build it? I would say that's a good question. I would say it's going back to maybe some of the things that I mentioned before. I did have a founder come to me one time. I'll never forget this. He had done enough research, like that he had done a tremendous amount of research, and his documentation was impeccable. It was like his documentation was PhD Harvard level type of presentation, right? And he definitely knew what he was talking about in terms of the research behind it. But in terms of the reality of like the efficacy of it, he was on another planet, like literally, because what this guy wanted to do is he wanted to extract, there's a moon, I think it's Saturn's moon, it's called Enceladus, but it has water on it. And he wanted to get funding by like 2030 to get funding to send a ship over to Enceladus to extract water for $100 billion a gallon. That's crazy, man. Like, and it might be possible in 100 years, but it's not. That's what I was saying earlier. I'm like, built for the near future, built for something that's like halfway plausible. So, I credit the guy. He's bold. I'll give him that. But I'm like, man, you really shouldn't be doing this, because it's just, you're way ahead of your time, man. So like, I would just say I would not be building this right now. Maybe there's a compartment of, you could break that whole mission down, right? And you could say, okay, maybe we'll do more research and we'll look for funding for more research to take a step towards the overall mission, which is like a 50-year mission, right? But maybe we need to send a rover out there or something like that. But to extract water from the moon is just insane. I think the only time I would tell a founder not to build something is if it was going to harm people, if it's, once again, just completely like irrelevant to where humanity is at. And if it's going to harm people or the environment, I would say don't build it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Nice, amazing. It was fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time and for your answers. And yeah, looking forward to see you soon.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the interview.